Let me tell you about Marcus, 38 years old, software engineer in Austin, married for 9 years. Marcus did everything the right way. He climbed the corporate ladder, bought a 4-bedroom house in a good school district. His wife quit her job after their second kid was born. He never questioned it. That was the deal, right? Provider and protector. For years it worked, or so he thought. Then came the pandemic, working from home, more time together, and that's when he started noticing things. The way she looked at him had changed, not with anger, not with contempt, with something worse, indifference. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, sigh when he talked about work. Their conversations became transactional. Did you pay the electric bill? Can you pick up groceries? The kids need new shoes. When did he stop being her husband and become her employee? One night, he overheard her on the phone with her sister. She didn't know he was in the hallway. He's a great provider, but I'm bored. I don't know, I just feel like there's no spark anymore. Marcus stood there, frozen. He'd just worked a 12-hour day. He'd deposited his entire bonus into their joint account that morning. He'd cancelled a guy's trip to stay home and help with the kids. And in that moment, he understood. He wasn't her partner. He was her paycheck. Here's the mechanism most men don't see. When you build your entire value proposition around provision, you create a transactional dynamic. She doesn't desire you, she depends on you. And dependency without desire breeds resentment, not respect. The mistake isn't providing. The mistake is believing that provision alone is enough, that working harder, earning more, and sacrificing more will make you irreplaceable. But here's the brutal truth. Paychecks are replaceable. Alimony exists. Child support exists. The state has made male provision a legal obligation, not a relationship advantage. So what happens when your only value is something the court can force you to provide anyway? You become optional. Marcus made the invisible mistake. He optimized for stability and forgot about attraction. He became predictable, safe, boring, and in a culture that glorifies excitement, novelty, and emotional stimulation, boring is the kiss of death. The lesson here isn't stop providing. It's stop making provision your only card. A man who only brings resources is a man who can be replaced by a better resource. A man who brings presence, leadership, boundaries, and self-respect, that's a man who's irreplaceable. Because here's what Marcus didn't understand until it was too late. She married a man. You became a function. Let's talk about the word that destroys more relationships than infidelity. Bored. I'm bored. 2 words that sound innocent but carry a nuclear payload. Because when a woman says she's bored in a relationship, she's not talking about a lack of activities. She's talking about a lack of emotional stimulation. And here's the trap. The more you provide, the more stable you make her life, the more room she has to feel bored. You think that's unfair? It is, but it's also predictable. Think about it. When you remove financial stress, logistical chaos, and survival pressure from someone's life, what's left? Emotional experience. And if you're not creating emotional experience, someone else will. This is the provider's paradox in action. Let me give you a concrete example. A guy I'll call David, 42, owns a small construction business in Phoenix, married 14 years, 2 kids. David worked his ass off, built his business from nothing, paid off the house. His wife drove a new SUV. The kids went to private school, family vacations every summer. But David was always working, always stressed, always in provider mode. When he came home, he was exhausted. He'd eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed. Weekends were for catching up on sleep and doing house projects. He thought he was being responsible. She thought he was being absent. One day she joined a yoga class, started going out with the girls more often, bought new clothes, started caring about her appearance again. David noticed but didn't think much of it. Good for her, he thought. She deserves to have fun. Then came the text message he saw by accident, from a guy named Jake in her phone. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. When David confronted her, you know what she said? You're never really here. You work all the time. I needed to feel alive again. I'm sorry, not I made a mistake, just I was bored. How does a man who sacrificed everything to build a life for his family hear that he wasn't enough because he was too busy providing? Here's the mechanism. Boredom in relationships isn't about a lack of entertainment. It's about a lack of polarity. When a man becomes too predictable, too accommodating, too focused on comfort and stability, he stops creating tension. And without tension, there's no attraction. Women are told they want a nice guy who's stable and reliable, and they do, for security. But security alone doesn't create desire. Desire requires uncertainty, challenge, a man who has boundaries and isn't afraid to create friction. The provider who says yes to everything, who sacrifices his own needs, who becomes a servant to domestic peace. He's not respected, he's resented. Because here's what nobody tells you. When you remove all conflict from a relationship in the name of keeping her happy, you also remove all passion. You become a roommate who pays the bills. The boredom trap is this. The more you optimize for her comfort, the less she feels for you. And when she stops feeling, she starts looking. Not because she's evil, because she's human. And humans crave emotional intensity. So what's the solution? Stop being boring. Stop being predictable. Stop sacrificing your own life, hobbies, friendships, and self-respect in the name of being a good husband. A man who has his own mission, his own standards, his own life, that's a man who creates attraction. A man who's always available, always accommodating, always in provider mode. That's a man who gets taken for granted. Attraction requires polarity. Polarity requires tension. Here's a question that makes most men uncomfortable. If you stopped providing tomorrow, would she still want you? Not, would she want you? Because there's a difference between staying out of obligation and staying out of desire. And most men in provider relationships know, deep down, which one they have. This is what I call the utility mindset. When a man becomes a utility, his value is measured by his function. Like a dishwasher, like a car, like a credit card. You're appreciated when you work, you're ignored when you don't. And when you break down or become obsolete, you're replaced. Let me tell you about Brian, 45 years old, accountant in Denver. Married 16 years, Brian was the definition of a provider. He handled all the finances, paid for everything. His wife hadn't worked in over a decade. He never complained. That was his role. Then Brian got laid off. The firm downsized. He had savings, but the income stopped. And almost immediately the dynamic shifted. His wife became cold, distant. She started making comments. When are you going to find something? We can't live like this forever. I didn't sign up for this. Brian was applying to jobs every day. He was stressed, anxious, doing everything he could. But for the first time in 16 years, he wasn't bringing in money. And suddenly, he wasn't valuable anymore. 3 months later, she filed for divorce. Not because he was abusive, not because he cheated, not because he stopped trying, because he stopped being useful. Here's the brutal reality. When your entire relationship is built on what you provide, your worth is conditional. You're not loved for who you are. You're tolerated for what you do. And the moment you can't do it anymore, whether by choice or circumstance, the mask comes off. This is the utility mindset in action. You're not a person, you're a service. And services can be cancelled. Now let me be clear. This doesn't mean all women think this way. It doesn't mean providing for your family is wrong. It means building your entire identity and relationship value around provision is dangerous. Because life happens. Jobs are lost, health fails, markets crash, and if your only value is your paycheck, what happens when the paycheck stops? The utility mindset is a trap because it makes you believe that sacrifice equals love, that the more you give up, the more you'll be appreciated. But appreciation has a shelf life. What starts as gratitude becomes expectation, and expectation becomes entitlement. You work 60 hours a week? That's normal. You skip the gym to spend time with the kids. That's your job. You give up your hobbies, your friends, your personal time. That's what a good husband does. And when you finally burn out, when you finally say, I need something for myself, you're selfish. This is the utility trap. You're praised for your function until you stop functioning. Then you're disposable. So how do you avoid this? First, never make provision your only value. Be a man who provides, yes, but also be a man who has his own life, his own interests, his own standards. Second, set boundaries. A man without boundaries is a man without respect. If you say yes to everything, your yes means nothing. Third, pay attention to how you're treated when you're not being useful. Does she appreciate you when you're just there? Or does she only engage when she needs something? Because here's the test. A woman who loves you will value your presence. A woman who uses you will only value your production. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know which one you have. There's a psychological phenomenon that most men don't understand until it's too late. It's called hedonic adaptation. In simple terms, humans get used to good things. You buy a new car, it's exciting for a month. Then it's just your car, you get a promotion, you're thrilled for a week. Then it's just your job. You provide a comfortable life for your family, they're grateful at first. Then it's just expected. This is appreciation decay, and it destroys provider relationships. Let me tell you about Tom, 51 years old, owns a plumbing business in Atlanta, married 22 years. 3 kids, all in college. Tom worked like a machine, built his business from scratch, paid for everything. His wife never had to work. The kids never wanted for anything. For 2 decades, Tom was the rock, the provider, the man who made it all possible. But somewhere along the way, the appreciation stopped. His wife stopped saying thank you, stopped acknowledging his effort, stopped seeing him as anything other than the guy who paid the bills. Tom would come home exhausted, covered in dirt and sweat, and she'd immediately hit him with a list. The dishwasher's broken. We need new gutters. Your daughter needs money for her sorority. No, how was your day? No, thank you for working so hard. Just demands. And when Tom finally snapped when he said, I'm tired of being treated like an ATM, you know what she said? That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. Not you're right, I'm sorry. Not I appreciate you. Just, that's your job. Here's what happened. Over 22 years, Tom's provision went from extraordinary to ordinary, from appreciated to expected, from valued to invisible. This is appreciation decay. The more consistently you provide, the less it's noticed. Your effort becomes the baseline. And anything less than the baseline is failure. Think about it. When you first start providing, it's special. She's grateful. She sees your sacrifice. She acknowledges your effort. But after years of consistency, it's not special anymore. It's normal. And normal doesn't get gratitude. Normal gets ignored. This is why the provider role is so dangerous. You're working harder than ever, sacrificing more than ever, and getting less appreciation than ever. And here's the worst part. If you complain, you're ungrateful. If you ask for acknowledgement, you're needy. If you reduce your effort, you're failing. You're trapped in a system where your best is expected and your struggles are ignored. So what's the mechanism here? Appreciation decay happens when provision becomes one-sided, when there's no reciprocity, when the relationship becomes a transaction where one person gives and the other takes. And the problem is, most men enable this. They think that asking for appreciation is weak, that a real man provides without expecting anything in return. But that's not strength, that's self-destruction. Because humans need reciprocity. We need to feel valued. We need to know that our effort matters. And when that's missing, resentment builds. You start to feel used, taken for granted, invisible. Tom felt this for years, but he kept quiet, kept working, kept providing, because that's what he thought he was supposed to do. Until one day, he realized something. His wife didn't love him. She loved what he provided, and the moment he couldn't provide anymore, she'd be gone. So he tested it. He took a week off, told her he was burned out and needed a break, didn't work, didn't handle any house issues, just rested. And within 3 days, she was furious. Not concerned, not supportive, furious. What are you doing? You can't just stop working. We have bills. We have responsibilities. That's when Tom knew. He wasn't a husband. He was a function. Here's the lesson. Appreciation. Decay is inevitable if you don't maintain boundaries and reciprocity. You can't just give and expect gratitude to last forever. It won't. Human nature doesn't work that way. You need to require respect. You need to expect reciprocity. You need to be willing to say no when you're being taken for granted, because a relationship without mutual appreciation isn't a relationship, it's exploitation. And if you're in a situation where your effort is invisible, where your sacrifice is expected, where your value is purely transactional, you need to ask yourself, is this what I want for the rest of my life? Because appreciation decay doesn't get better on its own, it gets worse. And the longer you tolerate it, the harder it is to change. So here's the question. What do you do when you realize you've become just a paycheck? First, understand this. You can't negotiate desire. You can't logic someone into appreciating you. You can't work harder to earn respect that should already be there. If you're in a relationship where your value is purely transactional, where you're loved for what you do instead of who you are, you have two options. Option 1, accept it. Understand that this is the deal. You provide, she consumes. You work, she benefits. And when you can't provide anymore, it's over. Some men choose this. They make peace with being a utility. They find meaning in their role as provider. Even if it's not reciprocated, I'm not here to judge that choice, but I am here to tell you it's a choice, and you should make it consciously, not by default. Option 2, reset the dynamic. This is harder. It requires courage. It requires boundaries. And it requires being willing to lose the relationship if it can't be saved. Here's what a reset looks like. First, you stop over-functioning. You stop doing everything. You stop sacrificing your own needs to keep everyone else comfortable. You start saying no. You start prioritizing yourself. You start having your own life, your own hobbies, your own friends. This will create friction. She'll push back. She'll accuse you of being selfish. She'll say you've changed. Good, you have changed. You've stopped being a doormat. Second, you require reciprocity. You make it clear that you're not a one-way provider, that you expect effort, appreciation, and respect in return. If she can't or won't provide that, you have your answer. Third, you rebuild your own value outside of provision. You focus on your health, your hobbies, your friendships, your purpose. You become a man who provides because he chooses to, not because he has to. A man who has options. A man who's valuable beyond his paycheck. This is the reset. And it's not easy, because it forces the relationship to reveal itself. If she's with you because she loves you, she'll adjust. She'll appreciate the change. She'll meet you halfway. If she's with you because you're useful, she'll resist. She'll escalate. She'll threaten to leave. And if that happens, you let her. Because a relationship built on utility isn't a relationship. It's a transaction. And you deserve better than that. Let me tell you about James. 47 years old, financial advisor in Houston, married 18 years. James was a classic provider, worked constantly, paid for everything. His wife hadn't worked in 15 years, and he was miserable, taken for granted, invisible, just a paycheck. So he did something radical. He stopped. Not completely, he still paid the bills, but he stopped doing extra, stopped working weekends, stopped canceling his plans to accommodate hers. He joined a gym, started playing basketball again, reconnected with old friends. His wife was furious at first. "What's gotten into you? Why are you being so selfish? This isn't who you are." But James held his ground. "This is exactly who I am. I'm just not hiding it anymore." For 3 months it was tense. She threatened divorce. She accused him of having an affair. She tried every manipulation tactic in the book. But James didn't budge. And then something shifted. She started seeing him differently, not as a utility, as a man with boundaries, a man with options, a man who wasn't desperate for her approval. And slowly, the dynamic changed. She started putting in effort, started being appreciative, started acting like a partner instead of a dependent. Did it save the marriage? I don't know. That's not the point. The point is James saved himself. He stopped being a victim of his own generosity. He stopped allowing himself to be reduced to a function. And whether the marriage survived or not, he became a man again. That's the reset. It's not about fixing her. It's about fixing yourself. Because here's the truth. You can't control how someone else values you, but you can control how you value yourself. And if you value yourself, if you have boundaries, if you refuse to be reduced to a paycheck, one of two things will happen. Either she'll rise to meet you, or she'll leave. And either way, you win. Because a life where you're respected is better than a life where you're used. Even if it's alone,